All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to all of the folks who are zooming in, watching either on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, and joining us for our community response to the 2022 State of the City that was delivered earlier today by Long Beach Mayor Robert Garcia. I'm super excited to be here with you all in the comfort of your own homes, or if you're driving home from work or wherever you may be. We hope that you're all continuing to stay safe and healthy. I'm excited to welcome an awesome group of community organizers, community leaders, just all around amazing human beings who are going to join us for this community response today. Before we jump into it, I want to acknowledge the land that many of us are zooming in from here in Long Beach, California, which is the land of the Tongva people and home to Pavungna, the sacred site of the Gabrielino Tongva people, which now is occupied by Cal State Long Beach. Many of you, I'm sure, are zooming in from all different parts of the city, across the north side, west side, central, downtown. So if you're watching and you're able to safely, feel free to drop a comment. Let us know where you're watching from, what part of the city that you're in. If you're a part of a community organization, we'd love to see that as well. So come and join us, and feel free, if you haven't had the chance, to go ahead and share this with your networks on social media so we can invite more and more folks in our community to be part of this conversation and response and dialogue to what we all heard. And we're going to have plenty of time to jump into it, because I know we were all connecting before this and itching to talk about some of what we heard and our response to these the vision of where Long Beach is headed and some of these solutions. So I'm super excited to jump into it. And before we do, I want to thank all of you who, in the before times and as we enter episode 3 of this panini, have joined us in the past for our in-person People State of the City, historically at First Congregational Church. We hope that very soon, and in the future, we're able to reconvene together and be together and gather in person. We're hoping to do People State of the City again this year. So, in the meanwhile, until we get there, this is a great way for us to connect, if that's in a safe and in a healthy way, as the Omicron surge continues, as we want to make sure that we're able to continue not just connecting with one another, but also being able to move and organize our work together to make Long Beach a safe and healthy community for all. So we're excited, although we hope to continue the People State of the City in the future. We're excited to gather amongst community and friends as well to talk about what we heard earlier, and kind of the state of things as we see it as well, and the community-led solutions. So, like I said, I encourage you to, in that same vision and hope of building community, to share this, to tag any other folks who you think want to be part of this conversation, across Twitter, YouTube, Facebook. We're all over there, and share that around. So, without further ado, I probably should have introduced myself if you don't know who I am. My name is James Swazo. My pronouns are he and him, and I'm the executive director with Long Beach Forward. And I am honored and privileged and just super excited to be with 3 amazing community leaders and organizers today. So we have Audrina Redman, who's the co-founder and organizer with Black Lives Matter Long Beach. We also have Leanna Noble, who is the program director with Long Beach Residents Empowered. And we have Gabby Hernandez, who is the executive director with the Long Beach Immigrant Rights Coalition. Look at us with this fancy technology everywhere. I love it. So before we jump in, I know our group, we're itching to dive in and talk about what we heard and what's going on in the community. I want to recap, if you haven't had the chance to watch or listen to Mayor Garcia's State of the City speech that was delivered earlier today, virtually, outside of the convention center. We heard a lot. There was a lot of things that we heard, and we heard a lot of clear tie-ins and alignment to President Biden's infrastructure package, a lot about uplifting Long Beach as a COVID-19 testing and vaccination model. And I think that's something we've all felt and impacted in different ways. And a lot of organizations, ourselves included, in these spaces and throughout the city in the past year, have played really key roles in helping support folks' access to testing and vaccines. And so I'm sure that will come up a lot. We heard a lot of numbers, and I think I'll let the panel get into kind of the things that stuck out to them. We heard a lot of conversation in terms of how the city has been impacted by COVID, but also lifting up a lot of the solutions that are being part of the Long Beach Recovery Act, which was a huge victory too. And I think all of us on here in so many different ways touched some of the work that came out of that in terms of advancing some community solutions and desires that have been on the table for a very long time. So there's a lot, and we talked earlier around some of the references to space speech and the space economy, housing as well, some of this new renewed focus around community policing. So I don't want to take away from what we're going to get into. So with that, lots of things that we heard earlier, we're going to dig into it. And I really want to start and with the panel talking about what y'all see as these challenges and opportunities as we're heading into the new year in the city of Long Beach. I know each of you have done a lot of organizing work and are continuing to do that. So let's jump in. I'd love to pass it to you, Audrina. What are challenges and opportunities in the city that you're seeing in the new year?
Well, I think the number one challenge, of course, is the political shuffleboard. Folks moving seats, switching seats, ambitions for other seats and offices, which will prevent them from doing very much that is revolutionary and life changing, and really sustaining in the seats that they currently have. That's the game, but I think that's a huge challenge for us. The other thing I think is a huge challenge for us is status quo, imagination, and willingness to challenge the status quo. I mean, that's always ongoing. This is how we can have a mayor and city officials who are still talking about funding the police departments when we are still in a pandemic that keeps showing us over and over again where else we need to be spending resources. So I think those two things, well, those three things: politics, ambitions slash elections, and the status quo, are just huge challenges to us. Um, and I'm sorry, James, I forgot the second part of that. Opportunities, you say. I mean, there's always opportunity in crises, right? And the crises will continue to present themselves, so we take advantage of those. We take advantage of the things that are happening to do what we know we need to do, which is to educate folks about what is happening around them. That is, for those of us with certain viewpoints and certain sites, that's our challenge, and that is our calling, is to continually engage our members of our community in what is actually happening, explaining to them this is why this is happening, and engaging them. So long as those other things exist, those opportunities to educate people will continue to exist.
I love that you pointed that out because I think that's going to be a huge challenge and opportunity, right? Is this landscape electorally where we have so many seats, in power, not just at the city level and council levels, but also at the state level as well, where it and congressional, right? Where it's going to determine a lot, right? And I think the role that I think you all play extremely well is ensuring that we hold folks accountable, right? And that we're actually ensuring that power is responsive to community needs. So I love that. I think that's a really great piece. Leanna, how about you? What are you seeing as some of the challenges and opportunities?
Well, I think Audrina's insight about the link between opportunities and challenges is a pretty significant one. I appreciate it. Um, when I think of this coming year, uh, I know we all have been really working hard with the last couple of years of COVID. Uh, and we found that it was really necessary to shift some of our work so that our constituencies and our communities and our neighborhoods could survive. Uh, and I guess to me, the opportunity and the challenge now is to recognize that with all of the horrific losses and traumas of the past 2 years, damn it, we have survived. And that now is the time for us to really deliberately do what we do so well, which is the base building, the organizing, so that we have a structured and an even more powerful movement uniting a lot of our constituencies and our issues here in Long Beach. So I'm very excited about, even in the midst of the ongoing challenges of COVID and us having learned we're the ones that got to take care of our constituencies, that this is really what is in front of us now, to do our base building. And I also feel like we're at a point where there's been nothing really said by the city officials of creative, imaginative solutions to housing stability and security. And that in fact, what we are is home starved. And when people are starving, that means shorter lives, more of our children are ill and dying, very serious impacts on all the rest of our lives. And that, again, we deserve a hell of a lot better and have our own ideas about how to solve these problems. So I really, again, I'm building off of what Audrina said. To hell with the musical chairs of all of these politicians running around to different offices. That lets us do the work that we do so darn well of base building and creating the power. So once these knuckleheads decide which office they are going to run for, that we are in an even stronger position to make our demands and to win the justice and the equity as Audrina said, the equity that is not upfront and prioritized when we hear from elected officials, including Mayor Garcia earlier today.
That was beautiful. I am reminded that every time I need a pep call, I call Leanna. Thank you. I mean, I think there's so much I want to come back to because I think you hit it on the head when we talk about the solutions, right? To or for home starved, right? What that means for our community, and I often wonder, like, is the medicine strong enough, right? So before we do that, I want to get you in here, Gabby, and we hear from you about the challenges and opportunities heading into the new year.
Yeah, so happy to be here with all of you again. And I share the same concern as Adrena and Liana, right? That the elections that are coming up this year are really going to stop people from taking action and making bold decisions. So I hope that you're watching and know that we're going to hold you accountable. And even if this is your last year within this office or in this city council district, whatever that may be, like, we're going to hold you accountable and you're going to see us time and time again at city council. I think that's important to highlight and for you to know. And I hope that you are really watching this. And I'm also, quite aware of the challenges that we have ahead of us, right? And some of those challenges, we already saw them in the previous years under a global pandemic. And I foresee them also in the future unless we take real, active, and bold actions. And so one of the things that I see is the budget, right? The budget not having communities' input. And we know that the city is embarking on a new process, but as we know, the city is never intentional about actually getting people's feedback and actually getting to the people that we need to hear their voices. That always comes from community organizations that bring their voices and highlight that. And so I'm really concerned about what that's going to look like this year. And I see that as a challenge, but I also see it as an opportunity. I hope that the city works on this and that they actually get their stuff together so we can actually get the community's input and that we get a better understanding of what the community needs, and so that we stop throwing money at the police, right? I see that as a challenge that is coming up. We've seen it in the previous years, and I really hope that we don't see that in 2022 for the 2023 budget, right? I really want us to listen to community and to not invest more in policing that is not benefiting our communities. And I think going back to your point, Liana, of like, people need their basic needs met. That's what we need, right? People need to have housing. People need to have access to food, transportation, all those things in order for them to be healthy and well. We don't need more money for policing. And I think that needs to be addressed this upcoming year. And I really want all of our elected officials locally to take action in that. And I think we have a big opportunity. We know as well that with more budget to policing also comes more surveillance, right? And that is surveillance for communities of color, right? Poor communities of color to add to that, right? And so I think that's a challenge that I see coming up, but also an opportunity, right? For folks, for commissions that are involved in the city, for elected officials to really look into that and not just say, oh, they're just talking, it's surveillance, they don't know what they're saying. No, listen to us. This is real. Our communities are really impacted by this, and I think this is the moment, this is the year for you to listen and really divest from the police surveillance technologies that they're using. And I think I see that as an opportunity as well. And in addition to that, we have the universal based income, right? Pilot program. I think this is also an opportunity. I see as a challenge that the city may not tap into the right people and the people that need this the most, right? And that there's not enough money for this, right? And I think what I see as an opportunity is that we actually get to the people, work with the people that actually have connections with community to get to the people that need this the most. We saw this during 2020, during 2021. There was zero help from the local government to immigrant families or immigrants or people in general experiencing a lot of hardships. And to me, that's a huge red flag about where the priorities are for the city. And so I think there's an opportunity this year, especially with this universal based income program, that we get to the communities that need it the most and that we invest in folks. And so LBRC did it. We gave back $2 million to community members that were facing, a lot of hardships because of the pandemic. And I can tell you and guarantee you that that was not enough. We hear it time and time again. The community needs way more than that. And so that's just a community organization that did that. I think we need the local government to really step it up this year and take that as an opportunity to really provide resources to community, but we can take this opportunity based on the universal based income program. So I think there's a lot that we can do, and there's a lot of opportunity in 2022.
I love it. Thank you, Gabby. That was great. And I think you hit on so many things that is a good segue to this piece around that I want to hear from y'all around what you took away from the speech earlier and some of the priorities and the way it was they were framed by Mayor Garcia as well. Because as I mentioned before, we heard a lot around, I think, as we do typically in the speeches around the tide of the economy, right? And we know that behind an economy there is people, right? Behind the numbers there are people, right? And so we heard a lot of reference, and I took away a lot around, even the reference to driving the tourism economy, right? It was hotels, airport, convention center, right? We also know there are workers who are part of that as well. We heard a lot of reference to this growing space economy, and a recognition of the housing crisis. And I think a lot that we've seen in the headlines and seen on social media in terms of some of the work that's focused around motel conversions, right? So 380 new units for houseless folks, which is great, nowhere near the need, right, of what we have in terms of houseless folks actually living in the city, which has gone up in terms since the pandemic, right? And you referenced like the focus on community policing. I'm sure Audrina is going to touch on that too. And so, and we also heard some of the pieces around enrollment for universal pre-K, which universal preschool, which we know is coming down the pipeline from the state of California, which is going to be an amazing opportunity, especially for early childhood. So I'm really curious, what are you all taking away from Mayor Garcia's address? What stood out to you, or maybe what was missing? So I'll pass it over to you, Audrina.
I kept looking for hard numbers. I kept looking for numbers that said we really heard the city residents and local residents, nearby residents who are affected very much by what happens in Long Beach. Um, I kept looking for something that would make me feel confident that they understood that racism really is a public health crisis. I was not hearing that. Um, when he started off talking about our vaccines, and this is none of what I'm going to say is to say poo poo, you didn't do anything good, right? They did. It's not people made efforts. Things are in process, of course, but could be doing better, and I'm looking for specific language that addresses and speaks to me and speaks to others who think like me, um, addressing the issues that we raised. So, for example, when he talked about vaccines and we have an 85% vaccination rate, I'm still looking to hear, okay, well, how are we dealing with the public health crises that the pandemic told us we have? Okay, because this will go away. The pandemic will run its course, but we will still have people suffering from diabetes, high blood pressure, congestive heart failure, asthma, et cetera, because of poor air quality, because of poor food apartheid in their community, et cetera, et cetera. How are we addressing those things? That's what I wanted to hear. I wanted to hear more about, I didn't want to hear a pride in having used our convention center as a migrant shelter. We shouldn't be doing that either. We shouldn't be doing that. We shouldn't have engaged in that. I wanted to, and when it comes to the Long Beach Police Department, again, I don't know if folks are deaf, as my grandfather used to say. Are you deaf? You know, it's like we keep using terms like community partnership and community policing. Those things have not worked. They have not worked. We keep talking about violence prevention. I want no conversation about violence prevention unless you're talking about how to control police violence against the community. That's what I want to talk about. Where is that? You talk. He talked about you. I couldn't believe it. He said exactly what we've been saying, which is that the city's actually safer than it was 20 years ago, safer than it was 30 years ago, it's safer than it was 40 years ago, and yet we have the largest Long Beach Police Department budget ever. And they're still talking about finding more ways to give these people money. For what? What they're doing is not necessary. We know what what prevents crime. How about a job, a house, child care, and enough money so you can feel like a whole human being? Those are the things that prevent crime anyway. So I kept hearing that, but I wasn't. That's just status quo stuff, right? We didn't hear anything else. Now, I did hear something which I didn't know about before, which was the free bus passes for students. Really love that idea, right? Love that idea. But conversely, I heard, we're phasing, oil is being phased out by 2035. I understand that actually before 2035, we'll probably be out of oil resources in the city. And yet, so many of the social justice programs that the city has agreed to fund are dependent in part on those decreasing funds. So, what's the real intent, the real effort toward addressing racism as a public health crisis? These sound like a bunch of sound bites for people who are getting ready to run for office so they can say, look what I did. Not that it actually was implemented well, or we know really what the results are, but I did it. I moved in that direction. And that's just not enough. That's just not good enough. Not good enough.
And shout out to the Sunrise Long Beach folks for tweeting out and pointing out that oil wells are expected to run dry before 2035. So it doesn't matter if we're going to end oil drilling; they're going to be dry by end. But I think, Audrina, you bring up such important points that tie into so much that we can't police our way out of this pandemic, right? And how much we didn't hear about addressing those basic needs, and even in the comment around housing, right, about the investment that's needed around renters' rights and supporting affordable housing. The call to action was, we're going to lean on the state and the federal government to give us funding, right? So there's no ownership or recognition of, like, we can look internally and address some hard questions about why a majority of our budget in the general fund is going towards policing instead of basic needs like housing. So thank you
And
for
we've pointed that out as a weakness of our city leadership many times. They
yeah,
wait, you know, instead
yeah,
of leading.
yeah, exactly. Leanna, how about you? What were some of the takeaways for you?
Well, again, is like Audrina shared, for me, it was mostly what I did not hear. I found it really ironic that this is basically almost exactly 10 years after good old Mayor Garcia, who was then my district's representative on the city council, 10 years ago, he voted, in fact, was a leader in the adaptation and the approval of the infamous downtown plan. And so we're about halfway through that travesty, where the community said loud and clear, not only is the downtown plan a huge giveaway to real estate and developer speculation, which will cause humongous rent increases and a major destruction of affordable housing. But you are also buying into this myth of the market. And so instead of him admitting what an atrocity this has been for not just downtown where I live, but Wilmore, Washington, Cambodia Town, even parts of North Long Beach and the West Side. We are the ones that are impacted by the giveaways to speculation, by depending on the market to solve our housing problems. And so, again, to me, what was missing was a recognition in a very real, concrete way of the damage that has been done during the years of Mayor Garcia's service. And that now if we're going to look at affordable housing, we have to undo that damage, plus meet the ever-growing demand for affordable housing. And unless we put equity up front at the core of housing policy and other policies, we're not going to have affordable housing, and we're not going to have the justice that our various constituencies, neighborhoods, and communities need. The other thing that I saw was this amazing Grand Canyon gap was the mayor talking about how woo-woo, we are now Space Beach. Well, I know for a fact that the unemployment rate across Long Beach may only be 7.7%, but downtown, Wilmore, Washington, Cambodia Town, the West Side, North Long Beach, in our communities of color, the unemployment rate is a hell of a lot more than 7.7%. And talking about space technology as a solution is questionable. Let me be diplomatic here. And again, that we're in a city where the mayor has said to us over and over again, we're going to lead the way in digital access. We're going to lead the way in our young kids and our families who are families of color, who are students that are so important to us. We're going to close that digital divide. And I hear him talking right now about an industry which is so far removed from the infrastructure and social structure supports that our communities demand and deserve, that it's a real disservice. And I believe it is not the kind of creative, imaginative leadership that we deserve and need.
Mm-hmm. You make a really great point, Leanna. And I was, when I heard him talk about the unemployment numbers, I thought about after the recession in Long Beach, where we had relatively low unemployment citywide, right? But by zip code, we were looking at it was like 2.6% unemployment in 90803, which is like Belmont Shore, Belmont Heights area. But we had 19% unemployment in 90813, right? Like,
right.
Huge difference. We're even though overall, right? And it doesn't, even if people get jobs, right? That's not a guarantee that they're livable wage jobs. And we were just talking about this yesterday. We have 6% inflation right now. I mean, the economy is just, I mean, we're all feeling this very intimately and viscerally. So I appreciate you lifting all of that up too. But Gabby, what takeaways did you have?
Yes, I think for me, one of the biggest takeaways was hearing him celebrate the migrant shelter, right? The emergency intake site at the convention center. It was quite alarming, and it goes back to, it just reaffirmed our concern back in 2021 when this was happening in April. There were not enough questions that were being right, of the federal government, and I saw that, and they're celebrating. We house 1,500 children. That's in the fact that you're celebrating that, it makes me really concerned about where you stand in regards to immigrant justice, just because there is no just way of caging any human being. There just isn't. And housing migrant children, minors, right, in a big scale facility is not good for anyone. It's not good for children. I said this before, and I'll say this again. If you would have a loved one spend a night there, the answer would be no. And if you can't do that, that means this is not a livable place for anyone. And so this is not something to celebrate. I'm also really concerned that there is no follow-up to those children that actually left, right? There was almost 1,500 children that were here. And what happened? Like, was there any follow-up? Was there any questions in regards to what was the follow-up looking like for these folks? There wasn't any, right? Also, going back to the conditions, right? What the public was seeing or hearing from local elected officials was very different from what's actually happening inside. So LBRC was really fortunate to be able to partner up with Disability Rights California to be able to go and monitor the facility. And this was after many attempts of trying to work with the city for them to let us go inside and monitor the facility, and so the facility would have some oversight. That didn't happen. We tried to have many conversations, and we were shut down many times from the city. They actually excluded us from many conversations. This is not new to anyone, but for us, we were really fortunate to be able to partner up with Disability Rights California and to go into the facility. And we have a whole report that someone from my team is going to be able to share in the chat, right, of the things that we found. So the children were spending more time that they had to there. They shouldn't have spent any time there, but they were spending way more than what the elected officials were telling us, right? The conditions were also not very good for kids, right? When you think about it, this is a big center, right, with tons of beds, right, where kids were sharing a big space, right? Kids were sharing, the same bathroom. Kids didn't have the opportunity to go outside whenever they wanted to. We had the opportunity to actually take some of the young people that had aged out from that facility to the airport, and we got to talk to the kids, right? We got to talk to the young people that were there, and a lot of times they express and question, like, am I free to go? Like, after leaving there, am I still free? Can I go? So that just gives you an idea of what they thought, right? They didn't think they were free in there. They also thought they were, caged and locked up in there. And so just to give you a glimpse, right? And so it's what stood out to me, that it was kind of brought up as a, let's celebrate this rather than let's be critical, and how do we hold the federal government accountable and actually figure out a plan that is humane, right, to welcome families and not put them in detention at any point, right? And so there wasn't any of that, and this is someone that's potentially, that is running for a federal office. So to me, those are questions that need to be asked, of like, if you're going to be in this position, right, are you asking the right critical questions of the federal government? Would you be able to hold the federal government accountable when it comes to this, right? And so that's one thing that came up for me and that stood out. Also, community policing, right, and framing this as something that is good, right? And I see a lot of posts, right, from the police department where they're sharing being with community, and it just doesn't feel honest, because I know many folks from our community don't call the police, right? So they're not going to take a picture with the police. And so having a picture with the police doesn't make that you're actually doing the right thing, or a good job. And so I think there needs to be more digging into that, right, and ensuring that, like, we move away from that. We actually stop using this community policing, because we know it hasn't worked, and we know that our communities don't feel safe around police. And then the last thing would be, I didn't hear anything about the housing element, right? And I wonder why. And it's probably because it's probably not going in the right direction, right? It didn't go. Community members were engaged in that process late last year. And I want to say late last year, but there was no mention about that, right, in his address. And so this is something big, right? This is something that happens not every year. And so I wonder why that wasn't brought up, right? And I think there's more that needs to be addressed in that. And I think celebrating tenants' rights when you weren't the one supporting, it's actually alarming as well, right? You got the things that we got, the protections that tenants got, was because people fought hard. They went to city council time and time again. It wasn't something that was given to people. The fact that we actually had to fight for that is quite concerning in a city like Long Beach, right? We shouldn't have to do that. Like, we should have elected officials that understand, that come from the community, and that understand the needs of the community. And so celebrating that is yes, but let's celebrate the community that made that happen. It wasn't elected officials that were pushing for that. It was actually people from the community that was advocating, very late at night to make this a reality for us.
Y'all are clearly organizers, because you're just tying everything together. So I want to bring this home and move into the last piece here, and really think about and ask y'all what needs to happen collectively to meet these challenges, and how can people take action, because I think we're at this point where we're going to be hearing a lot of rhetoric, right? Like, let's be honest, especially as we head into this campaign cycle, and we see different conversations happening. And so what needs to happen collectively? What can we do together? Where can people take action? So how about we start with you, Audrina?
Boy, that could be such a long list to that question. I was making notes to myself listening to Gabby. I was like, oh yeah, oh yeah. Um, if I had to say, there's two things that come to mind. One would be accountability. We can't be afraid of accountability, um, be, because accountability means hard work, right? It means I'm willing to admit that something is wrong. I'm willing to say I have a role in fixing it, and I'm willing to take the steps to do that. I see a lot of tail turning and running in the other direction. Reminds me much of our mayor being in the middle of a crowd of Black folks in summer of 2020, telling him what issues they have with the city, and him saying to folks, well, I've talked to Black leaders, and you're in a circle full of people telling you what the problem is, but you're going to tell them you're listening to somebody else rather than them. And that's a problem, right? That is a problem that happens over and over again. Another example of that, the survey for the Long Beach police chief. Who responded to that survey? It's people who live on the east side of Long Beach, white, middle class, fairly secure, right? Whereas our organizations have been at that city council for the last 2 or 3 years with our people, with our own surveys of our people, telling them over and over again what the problem is, right? But our voices are not legitimate. They don't want to be held accountable to us. So I think changing who and what the city is, what city leaders are accountable to, um, is so very key there. Another thing I think, um, is I want our city leaders to treat racism as a public health crisis in the way that Leanna reminded us they treated development of downtown. I've been living in Long Beach about 27 years, and from the time I moved here, Dan Baker, who was my representative in the second district at that time, um, was part of a planning committee for reshaping Long Beach, downtown Long Beach in particular, under Mayor Beverly O'Neill. They figured out how to do that. They made a plan. They stuck with that plan. We have a bunch of housing now. That housing doesn't do as much as it needs to for low income folks, but we still have new housing. We have a revitalized downtown, right? I want to see them make that same level of commitment to dealing with the issues that our people are facing, to dealing with police violence, to dealing with housing, to dealing with a mother or a family deciding to not go to work because while it's hard, they can't afford to go to work because they can't afford childcare. Um, I want to see them dealing with that. I want to make a plan for that. I want to see them making a plan for dealing with the health issues we know we have in our city, dealing with the number of homeless people, the unhoused folks on our streets, dealing with the number of folks who are captured by opioids and captured by other addictive substances because of life stressors and what have you. That's what I want to see them doing. I want to see them making the commitment to that kind of thing. But again, that requires accountability, and it requires that be the vision. Um, yeah, and I don't see yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that. That's what I would like to see.
Love it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. How about you, Leanna? What are you seeing as like where people can take action and step into this?
Well, now we've got a fantastic program, that platform that Audrina has laid out for us. And when I think about what are some of the opportunities for all of us moving forward into this next year, um, you know, we learned a lot as organized community groups, as tenants, as older folks, which I'm definitely a part of that club. Um, that so that this past year, as Gabby mentioned, for the first time, the community was able to not only educate the city staff, but also to some degree the elected officials, and to win a housing element for the first time has got some decent language in it about a plan, as Audrina is putting the challenge out there, on how do we get to affordable housing. And so I think that we've learned these great lessons in the last couple of years as we have struggled so that our communities and constituencies can survive something as horrific as COVID. And I think we are now ready to take those lessons of these last couple of years and to put those to work so that we are again organizing ourselves, that we want to build the organizations that speak, that literally are the voices for the important immigrant communities here in Long Beach, for the historically and currently important Black community here in Long Beach, for the vast majority of the residents who are renters. In some of our neighborhoods, we're not talking the overall average of 60% of us being renters. We've got neighborhoods where 90% of the people who live there are renters. And that's the reality going forward. We're going to be renters. There's all kinds of reasons for that. Big one being economics. And so that we really need these policies, like Adrena says, that are truly going to get to the guts of the problems that exist in our communities. So, let's quit kicking the can down the road around housing with eviction moratoriums. God knows those moratoriums have been important. What we need now is policies that are going to stabilize rent increases, which have, we talked about 32% rent increases. Long Beach is one of the most expensive places to live, for God's sake, now. And, so there's policies that will really get to the guts of the inequities that we all live with, the inherent racism in so much of the city's policies, whether it's housing or policing or, it's right there at the core of everything. And to me, collectively, we can fight back. We're even though these last 2 years feel like hell, and they have been, we have got what it takes to organize ourselves and to work together. And frankly, to find ways, as I understood Audrina to be talking about, that maybe what we all should do is be carrying voter registration forms in our back pocket is we are out there canvassing and begin to let elected officials know that, we're not just clear spokespeople with such a vision of what the solutions are, that we will utilize any and all tactics as a part of our strategies to win equity, to win justice that we are absolutely deserving to have in our lives. And specifically, I'm thinking, as we've been talking, about our people's budget work, and really am interested as an active member of Libre for us to make damn sure that our work around putting money where the city mouth is and putting money where the city isn't providing leadership, that's how we want our tax money spent, is to benefit us and our neighbors.
I love your tie-in in there around the importance of those relationships and starting one-on-one, because it reminds me, which I think you remind me of this often, that if we want mass change, we need a mass movement, right? And so that's the basic of it. So thank you. Gabby, how about you? What needs to happen collectively to meet these challenges? Where can people take action?
Yeah, I'll be quick for this one because I know we've been talking for a minute now. But I think talking about the people's budget is so key. Like, we've had wins over the past few years, and so there's so much that we can do. There's so much. And so I want people to be engaged in that process. There's tons of organizations that are involved, also community members. You don't have to be part of an organization. You can just be engaged in those efforts. And I encourage you all to be. I feel like a lot of folks were really angry after the uprisings, right? And they were like willing to take action, and don't just wait for those things to happen. Those things are happening every day. That's because they're not televised or on social media. It doesn't mean they're not happening. So take action. Don't let for those things to come up for you to be an activist, right? Like, you can do that now. This is the city that we live in, and we have so much that we can do, so much influence and so much power collectively to really get the things that we need, right? And so one of the things that I hope for this year that we can all do collectively is really to divest from the police department and invest in communities, right? Specifically communities of color, specifically poor communities. And so I really want to highlight that. I think we can do that together. And there's things that you can do now, like right now. So as I talked about more funding for police and surveillance and all that that impacts the poor communities of color, you can do something now tonight. So after this, you can go to the Equity and Human Relations Commission that is happening at 6. Actually, it's already going on, but someone from LBRC is going to put the link on the chat, and you can show up right now and go and make public comment and say why this technologies should not be used by the local police department, why we should not be investing in that. So you can do that today. You can do that tonight. And so it's really easy. You can do it from your home. You don't have to go out anywhere. So the link is on there. I encourage everyone to get engaged, whether it's tonight or tomorrow. There's always things happening. There's always calls to action. And so I suggest that folks follow all the organizations that are here, including LBRC at LBRC 562, where you can follow all the calls to actions that we have. We do work locally, but also statewide. And so there's things that you can do. You just got to find your home.
I love that. I love that. And I think there's such a, we're in such a moment right now in Long Beach, right? Especially after, in the wake of this, what seems never ending panini, where there's so much organizing happening, right? Whether it's with your respective organizations, groups like, we mentioned Sunrise earlier, doing climate justice work, right? Filipino Migrant Center, who are organizing Filipino families, primarily over in the West Side, right? There's just so much work that's happening that this is really a moment and opportunity for folks to really get connected. So I also want to mention that the People's State of the City, organized by the Long Beach Rising Coalition, is going to be happening. There's going to be a lot of work to really make sure that we're all engaged and plugged in that work. So stay tuned. I think that's going to be a really amazing moment for us to really come together and really create more opportunities and doors for people to be part of this movement. And so I feel like that's what y'all have done tonight. I really appreciate being in community and in this work with all of y'all. You really give me the inspiration and motivation to keep going on. So thank you so much for joining us, for all of our amazing organizers, for sharing your response and perspectives and viewpoints. This was an amazing conversation, and I hope folks really enjoyed it. Judging by all these comments, it looked like it's been really great. So thank you to each of you for joining us for this evening. Thank you so much to our behind-the-scenes tech team from Long Beach Forward, Melissa, Diana, Rudy. Y'all have been amazing. There's a whole team of digital organizers behind this who are helping us put it together. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Please continue to stay safe and healthy. Be here for your community. Be part of your community. And we look forward to seeing you out on the next Zoom and hopefully in the street soon. Thanks, y'all.